The glass shattered against the marble floor of the restaurant, and in that moment my entire world exploded with it. My grandfather's voice cut through the sudden silence like a knife. "Happy birthday, Claire. Show me how you've spent your $3 million trust fund over the past 25 years. 28 candles flickered on the cake in front of me, but all I could see was my mother's face draining of colour, my father's fork clattering onto his plate, and my sister Lily's eyes going wide with shock. $3 million. I had never seen a single cent of it. If you want to know how a family can steal your entire life from under your nose, stick around, because this story gets even crazier. And if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, hit that like button and subscribe, because you're going to want to hear how this ends. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my situation. Let me take you back to the beginning to show you how I became the ghost in my own life story. I grew up in Bellevue, Washington, in a house that looked perfect from the outside. My parents, Daniel and Elaine Monroe, were the kind of couple who threw elegant dinner parties and belonged to the right country club. My younger sister Lily was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong with her bright smile and bubbly personality. And then there was me, Claire, the older daughter, who learned early on that staying quiet and out of the way was the safest option. From as far back as I can remember, there was always this unspoken hierarchy in our family. Lily got new clothes for school while I wore hand-me-downs from cousins. Lily got piano lessons and dance classes while I was told we couldn't afford extras for both of us. When I asked why my mother would give me that tight smile and say, "Claire, you need to learn to be more independent. Lily needs more support right now." Right now somehow turned into forever. By the time I was 16, I had my first part-time job at a coffee shop. My parents praised me for my work ethic, but I noticed they never offered to help with the things my paycheck went toward. My car broke down senior year, and when I asked my father for help with the repair bill, he patted my shoulder and said, "You're doing great on your own, kiddo. You'll figure it out." I did figure it out. I picked up extra shifts and ate ramen for 2 months straight while Lily got a brand new Audi for her 16th birthday. College was when the disparity became impossible to ignore. I had decent grades and got into University of Washington, but there was no college fund waiting for me. My parents sat me down and explained that they had some financial constraints and I would need to take out student loans and work my way through school. I was disappointed but not entirely surprised. This was just how things were in our family. I was the self-sufficient one. Then Lily's college acceptance letters started arriving. She got into Columbia University in New York, one of the most expensive schools in the country. I was in the kitchen making dinner, still in my barista apron from my afternoon shift, when my mother announced the news with tears of joy. "We're so proud of you, darling. Of course we'll make it work. This is your dream school." I remember standing there with a spatula in my hand, frozen. "Wait, how are you paying for Columbia?" I asked. My mother's expression turned cold. "That's not really your concern, Claire. You're managing just fine with your loans. Lily has different needs." Different needs? That phrase would echo in my head for years. I watched my sister go off to New York with a fully funded education, a generous monthly allowance, and a beautiful apartment near campus that my parents helped pay for. Meanwhile, I was working 2 jobs while taking a full course load, living in a cramped studio apartment with 2 roommates, and surviving on pasta and the free food samples from my job at Costco. When I called home, exhausted and overwhelmed, my mother would say things like, "Well, you chose a state school, it should be easier," as if the problem was my choices and not their blatant favoritism. The years after college were a blur of struggle and silence. I graduated with $50,000 in debt and moved to Seattle for a job that barely covered my rent and loan payments. I'd always imagined that once I was out of school and established, my parents might finally see me, might finally acknowledge how hard I had worked. But nothing changed. Family dinners were performances where my mother controlled every conversation, my father avoided any topic of substance, and Lily talked endlessly about her exciting life in New York, funded by God knows what. I started dating someone during this time, a guy named Marcus, who seemed kind at first. But even he picked up on my family's dynamic. After one particularly uncomfortable Thanksgiving dinner, where my parents gushed over Lily's new marketing job while barely asking about my work, Marcus said in the car ride home, "Do they even like you?" The question stung because I had been asking myself the same thing for years. Marcus and I didn't last. Turns out I had learned to accept so little from my family that I accepted the same from romantic partners. He criticised me constantly, made me feel small, and I just took it because that's what I had been trained to do. When he finally left me for someone else, I was almost relieved. At least I could stop pretending I was happy. By the time my 28th birthday rolled around, I was exhausted. Exhausted from working hard and having nothing to show for it. Exhausted from watching Lily live a life of comfort while I scraped by. Exhausted from loving a family that seemed incapable of loving me back. But I still showed up to that birthday dinner at the upscale restaurant in Bellevue, still put on a smile, still played my role as the invisible daughter. The only person who had ever truly seen me was my grandfather, Arthur Monroe. He was my father's father, a sharp-eyed man in his 80s who had made his fortune in real estate development. While my parents were busy lavishing attention on Lily, Grandpa Arthur would seek me out at family gatherings. He would ask about my life, really ask, and actually listen to the answers. He was the one who had helped me buy my first car when I was 17, slipping me a check and saying, "Don't tell your parents, this is between you and me." He was the one who sent me care packages in college with gift cards and encouraging notes. He was my lifeline. So when Grandpa Arthur stood up at my birthday dinner, I expected one of his sweet sentimental toasts. What I got instead was a nuclear bomb. "Happy birthday, Claire. Show me how you've spent your $3 million trust fund over the past 25 years. His voice rang out across the restaurant, clear and deliberate. Every head in the private dining room turned toward us. I felt like I was underwater. The sounds around me became muffled. $3 million. What trust fund? My hands started shaking and I gripped the edge of the table. "Grandpa, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never had any trust fund." The look on his face broke my heart. It was a mixture of rage and devastation. "You don't know," he said quietly, but his voice carried, "They never told you." My mother's chair scraped against the floor as she shot to her feet. "Dad, this is not the time or place for this conversation. You're confused." Her voice had that razor-sharp edge I knew so well, the one she used when she was about to shut down any challenge to her authority. But Grandpa Arthur wasn't backing down. He raised his hand, and his lawyer, a distinguished man named Collins, who I had met at a few family events, stepped forward from where he had been standing near the entrance. He was carrying a thick leather portfolio. "I am not confused, Elaine," my grandfather said, his voice now cold as ice. "I am finally done being complicit in your lies." He turned to me, his eyes softening. "Claire, when you turned 3 years old, I established a trust fund in your name. $3 million. It was meant to give you security to pay for your education to help you start your life. It was supposed to be untouchable until you turned 21, at which point you would gain full access. Your parents were named as trustees until that time, responsible for managing it in your best interest." The room was spinning. I looked at my mother, at my father, searching their faces for denial, for some explanation that would make this make sense. Instead I saw guilt, raw, undeniable guilt. "You knew," I whispered. "You both knew and you never told me." My father opened his mouth but no words came out. My mother's face had gone from pale to a mottled red. Lily sat frozen, looking between all of us like she had just witnessed a car crash. Collins set the portfolio down on the table in front of me with a heavy thud. "Miss Monroe, these are the complete records of your trust fund. Every deposit, every withdrawal, every transaction over the past 25 years. Your grandfather requested a full audit 6 months ago when he began to suspect irregularities." My hands trembled as I opened the folder. The first page was the original trust document dated 3 days after my 3rd birthday. $3 million placed in trust for Claire Elizabeth Monroe to be used for her health education, maintenance and support. Trustees, Daniel James Monroe and Elaine Patricia Monroe. I flipped to the next page, then the next, and the next. Each one was a knife to the heart. Withdrawals. Hundreds of withdrawals. $20,000 for a down payment on a house. $50,000 for kitchen renovations and a pool installation. $35,000 for a luxury vehicle, $70,000 in tuition payments to Columbia University, all in the years Lily attended, $20,000 for a study abroad program in Paris, $15,000 for an apartment security deposit in Manhattan. The list went on and on, a catalogue of my stolen life written in black and white. "You spent my money," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, then louder. "You spent my money on yourselves, on Lily, on everything except me." "Claire, sweetie, it's not that simple." My mother started reaching for my hand. I yanked it away like she had burned me. "Don't you dare touch me! Don't you dare call me sweetie!" I stood up the chair, falling backward behind me. "While I was working 2 jobs in college, while I was eating ramen and skipping meals, while I was begging you for help with a $400 car repair, and you told me to figure it out myself, you were spending my money on Lily's Ivy League education, on your house renovations." "We were going to tell you," my father said weakly. "We were waiting for the right time." "The right time?" I laughed, but it was a hollow, broken sound. "When was the right time, Dad? When I was crying because I couldn't afford textbooks? When I had to drop a class because I couldn't afford the lab fees? When I spent my 21st birthday alone in my apartment because I had to work a double shift to make rent? When was the right time?" Lily finally spoke, her voice small and scared. "Claire, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." I looked at my little sister, the golden child, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel jealous of her. I felt sorry for her. "Maybe you didn't know where the money came from, Lily, but you knew how I lived compared to you. You saw me struggling. You never once questioned why you had everything while I had nothing." Grandpa Arthur placed his hand on my shoulder. "Claire, you and I are meeting with Collins tomorrow morning at 9. We're going to go through every single document, every single transaction, and then we're going to decide what to do next." He turned to my parents, and I had never seen him look so disappointed. "Daniel, Elaine, you will also have a meeting with Collins. This ends now." My mother tried one more time. "Dad, you're making this into something it isn't. We used the money for family expenses. Claire is part of this family. It all benefited her in the end." "Did it?" I asked. "Did my $50,000 in student loan debt benefit me? Did eating cereal for dinner 3 nights a week benefit me? Did feeling worthless and invisible for my entire life benefit me?" I grabbed the portfolio, clutching it to my chest like a lifeline. "You stole from me. You stole my money, my opportunities, my choices. You stole my life." I walked out of that restaurant with my grandfather's hand on my back, leaving behind the wreckage of my family. In the parking lot, I called my best friend Jade, the one person outside my grandfather who had always believed in me. My voice was shaking so hard I could barely get the words out. "Jade, I need you. Something happened, something big." "I'm on my way," she said immediately. "Where are you?" As I waited for her, sitting in my grandfather's car with Collins standing a respectful distance away giving us privacy, I looked at the restaurant's glowing windows. Through them, I could see my parents still sitting at the table, my mother's face in her hands, my father staring at nothing. Lily was gone, probably in the bathroom, crying. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked my grandfather. He sighed, and suddenly he looked every one of his 83 years. "I trusted your father to do the right thing. He's my son, and I believed he would honour the spirit of the trust. I knew they were accessing the funds, but Daniel assured me it was all for your benefit, for family needs that included you. It wasn't until 6 months ago, when I saw how you were living, how thin you'd gotten, how exhausted you looked, that I started to really question things. I had Collins do a quiet preliminary review, and what we found..." He shook his head. "I've never been so ashamed of my own son." "It's not your fault, Grandpa." "Yes, it is. I should have checked sooner. I should have made sure you had access to information about your own trust. I failed you, Claire." I leaned my head on his shoulder, something I hadn't done since I was a little girl. "You're here now, that's what matters." That night I couldn't sleep. I sat on my friend Jade's couch, where I had crashed, rather than going back to my own apartment. I kept opening the portfolio and reading through the documents, each transaction another revelation. They had taken my money to pay off their mortgage. They had used it for vacations to Europe. They had used it to set Lily up in a beautiful apartment while I lived with cockroaches. They had stolen 25 years of security from me and given me poverty instead. Jade sat with me, bringing me tea I didn't drink and listening to me swing between tears and rage. "What are you going to do?" she finally asked as the sun started to rise. "I'm going to get it back," I said. "Every penny, and then I'm going to make sure they can never do this to anyone else again." The meeting with Collins the next morning was even worse than I had imagined. In the stark light of his downtown office, with every document laid out in front of me, the full scope of the betrayal became clear. The trust had been worth $3 million when it was established in 1999. With conservative investments and compound interest, it should have grown substantially. Instead, by the time I turned 21 in 2018, it had been reduced to less than $800,000. And the withdrawals hadn't stopped there. Over the past 7 years, my parents had continued to drain it under various justifications. As of last month, there was barely $200,000 left. "They stole over $3 million from you when you account for the lost growth," Collins explained, his voice professional but tinged with anger. "This is systematic embezzlement, Miss Monroe. Every withdrawal required both trustees to sign off, which means both your parents were active participants." My grandfather sat beside me, his jaw clenched. What are Claire's legal options? Collins laid out several scenarios. I could file a civil lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty, demanding the return of all misappropriated funds plus interest and damages. I could report them to law enforcement for potential criminal prosecution, though that would be harder to prove beyond the civil case. Or I could negotiate a settlement, though Collins strongly advised against that, given the scale of the theft. "I want it all back," I said firmly. "Every dollar. I want them to face what they did. I want the truth to come out." "There's something else you should know," Collins said carefully. "Your Uncle Edward has already reached out to me. He's retained himself as your parents' counsel." Edward. My father's younger brother, the sleazy lawyer who specialised in helping rich people avoid consequences. He had always given me the creeps with his oil-slick smile and condescending attitude. Of course he would swoop in to protect the family reputation. "Let him come," I said. "I have the truth on my side." The preliminary hearing was set for 2 weeks later, but Edward didn't wait that long to make his move. He showed up at my apartment 3 days after my birthday, somehow having gotten my address. When I opened the door and saw him standing there in his expensive suit, my stomach turned. "Claire," he said with false warmth, "we need to talk." "I don't think we do. You're representing the people who robbed me. Anything you say to me should go through my lawyer." He held up his hands in a placating gesture. "I'm here as family, not as their lawyer. May I come in just for a moment?" Against my better judgment, I let him in, but left the door open. He looked around my cramped apartment with barely concealed disdain, taking in the second-hand furniture and the water stain on the ceiling I couldn't afford to fix. "Claire, you have to understand that your parents never meant to hurt you," he began. "They were managing the trust for the benefit of the whole family. Family resources are meant to be shared." "It wasn't a family trust," I said flatly. "It was my trust. My grandfather set it up specifically for me." "That's a very individualistic way to look at it," Edward said, his smile never wavering. "Your parents provided you with a home food education. The money went toward those things." "No, it didn't. It went toward their mortgage, their renovations, their cars, and Lily's everything. I got nothing. Less than nothing, because they made me believe we couldn't afford to help me when they were spending my money on themselves." Edward's expression hardened slightly. "If you pursue this, you're going to destroy your family. Your sister will be dragged through this. Your parents could lose everything. Is that really what you want? To be the vindictive daughter who tore her family apart over money." "They tore this family apart," I said, my voice rising. "They stole from me. They lied to me my entire life. They watched me struggle and suffer while they spent my money. Don't you dare try to make me the villain here. Think about your future, Claire. If this goes public, it will follow you. People will see you as the girl who sued her own parents. It will affect your career, your relationships. Wouldn't it be better to work this out quietly? I'm sure we can come to an arrangement where you're made whole without all the ugliness of litigation." "Get out," I said. "Claire, be reasonable. Get out of my apartment, or I'm calling the police and telling them my parents' lawyer is harassing me." He left, but not before giving me a look that made it clear this was far from over. I called Collins immediately and told him about the visit. He was furious and promised to file a formal complaint about Edward's inappropriate contact with me. But more importantly, he accelerated our timeline. If my parents wanted to play hardball, we would bring everything out into the open. The formal mediation session was held 1 week later. My grandfather and Collins accompanied me to a conference room in a downtown law office. My parents arrived with Edward, and the tension in the room was suffocating. My mother wouldn't even look at me. My father kept clearing his throat like he was about to say something, but never did. Collins didn't waste time. He laid out the full forensic accounting of the trust fund transaction by transaction year by year. The down payment on their house that they had told me came from an inheritance from my mother's aunt. The kitchen renovation they had claimed was covered by a home equity loan. The pool they said my father's bonus paid for. All lies. All purchased with my money. $70,000 in tuition payments to Columbia University, Collins read aloud, all during the years Lily Monroe attended. Yet Claire was told the family couldn't afford to help with her state school tuition and had to take out loans. My mother finally looked up, her eyes red. We were going to pay her back. We were going to make it right. When? I asked. I'm 28 years old. When were you going to make it right after you spent every last penny? We did what we thought was best for the family, my father said weakly. You did what was best for yourselves and Lily, I shot back. You systematically stole from me while making me feel worthless for needing help. Do you have any idea what you did to me? I have spent my entire adult life believing I wasn't worth investing in, that I wasn't worth loving. You conditioned me to accept crumbs while you feasted. You destroyed my self-worth along with my financial security. Edward jumped in. Let's stay focused on the financials, not emotion. My clients are willing to acknowledge some errors in judgment. We're prepared to offer Miss Monroe a settlement of $300,000 to resolve this matter quietly and avoid the courts. $300,000, Collins let out a harsh laugh. Your clients stole over $3 million when you account for the principal lost investment growth and the emotional damages of watching your clients struggle needlessly. We're seeking full restitution of $5 million plus punitive damages. The mediation went nowhere. My parents weren't willing to admit the full scope of what they had done, and I wasn't willing to let them off easy. We left that conference room enemies, and I felt both heartbroken and strangely free. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to please them or win their approval. I was fighting for myself. The week before the trial began, something unexpected happened. Lily called me. We hadn't spoken since the birthday dinner, and I had assumed she had chosen their side. Can we meet? She asked, her voice thick with tears. Please, Claire, I need to talk to you. We met at a coffee shop near her apartment. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in days. When she sat down across from me, she started crying immediately. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. I didn't know. I really didn't know it was your money. But Claire, I should have known something was wrong. I should have questioned why you had nothing when I had everything. I was selfish and blind, and I benefited from their theft. I'm so sorry. Part of me wanted to stay angry at her, but looking at my little sister broken and genuinely remorseful, I couldn't maintain the rage. You were a kid for most of it, I said quietly. And they manipulated both of us. You just got the better end of the manipulation. I want to help, she said urgently. I've been going through my own records, looking at everything they've given me, the apartment they helped pay for. They put the deposit down from the trust. My car, also the trust. There are probably more things I don't even know about. She pulled out a folder. I wrote down everything I could remember, every payment, every gift. And Claire, I want to testify. I want to tell the truth about what I received. I stared at her, shocked. Lily, that would destroy your relationship with Mum and Dad. They already destroyed our family, she said firmly. You deserved better. I should have seen it, but I was too busy enjoying the privileges of being the favourite. If I can help you get justice, that's the least I can do. Having Lily on my side changed everything. Collins immediately saw the value of her testimony. The case wasn't just about dry financial records anymore. It was about a human story of favouritism, manipulation and theft. It was about two sisters, one robbed and one unknowingly complicit, both ultimately victims of their parents' greed and dishonesty. The trial began on a grey Monday morning in October. The courtroom was packed with people I didn't know, drawn by the sensational nature of the case. Local news had picked up the story, running headlines about the trust fund scandal and the stolen inheritance. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Collins and my grandfather, trying to steady my breathing. My parents sat across the aisle with Edward, both looking older than I remembered. My mother's perfectly maintained appearance was cracking. My father couldn't seem to sit still. Good. Let them feel uncomfortable. Let them feel a fraction of the anxiety and shame I had lived with for years. Collins presented our case methodically. He walked the jury through the trust documents, explaining how it was set up and what it was meant to do. Then he showed them the withdrawals one by one, each accompanied by documentation of what the money was actually used for. Pictures of their renovated house, receipts from luxury vacations, Columbia tuition bills. Each piece of evidence was damning. Then it was my turn to testify. I had been dreading this moment, but when I stood up and walked to the witness stand, something shifted inside me. I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready to tell my story. Collins guided me through my testimony gently. I talked about my childhood, about learning early that my needs came last. I talked about working multiple jobs while going to school, about the shame of not being able to afford basic necessities. I talked about asking my parents for help and being told to be more independent while watching Lily receive everything she ever wanted. I detailed every moment of financial struggle, every moment of emotional abandonment, while knowing now that my own money could have changed everything. "Miss Monroe," Collins asked, "when you were working 2 jobs during college and eating ramen most nights, what would it have meant to know you had a trust fund?" I took a breath, feeling years of pain rising up. It would have meant everything. Not just the money, though, that would have changed my life, but knowing that someone my grandfather had thought about my future and cared enough to provide for me. That would have given me hope. Instead, I believed I was alone. I believed I wasn't worth helping. My parents could have told me about the trust, even if they said I couldn't access it yet. But they didn't, because they knew that the moment I knew about it, I would ask questions about how it was being used. They kept me in the dark deliberately. Edward's cross-examination was brutal, but I was ready for it. He tried to paint me as an ungrateful daughter who was being manipulated by my vindictive grandfather. He suggested that I had been provided for adequately and was now simply greedy. "Miss Monroe, isn't it true that your parents provided you with a home for 18 years, fed you, clothed? You sent you to good public schools?" he asked with a smirk. "Yes," I said calmly. "Parents are legally obligated to do those things. That doesn't give them the right to steal $3 million that wasn't theirs." Steal is a strong word. They were the trustees. They had the legal right to make withdrawals. "For my benefit," I said firmly. "The trust was supposed to be used for my health, education, maintenance and support. Please show me which part of their luxury kitchen renovation benefited me. Show me how Lily's apartment in Manhattan supported me. Show me how their European vacations maintained me." I saw a few jurors nodding, and Edward's smirk faltered. When Lily took the stand, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. She testified about her college experience, about the ease with which money appeared whenever she needed it, about never questioning where it came from, because she had been told our parents were successful. Then she talked about the moment at my birthday dinner when the truth came out. "I realised I had been living Claire's life," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Everything I had, the education, the opportunities, the comfort, it should have been hers. And while I was enjoying it all, she was suffering. Our parents made me complicit in stealing from my own sister." Edward objected repeatedly, trying to exclude her testimony as emotional manipulation. But the judge allowed it. This wasn't just about money, it was about the human cost of my parents' actions. The most damaging moment came when Collins presented an old recording that my grandfather had found in his files. It was from 1999, shortly after he had established the trust. He was talking to his accountant, discussing his concerns. My grandfather's younger voice came through the speakers. "I'm setting this up for Claire specifically because I worry Daniel and Elaine will favour Lily. I've seen how they treat the girls differently. This trust is Claire's security, her nest egg. I need you to make sure the terms are crystal clear. It's for Claire's benefit, not the family's general use." I'm trusting Daniel to honour that, but if there are ever questions, I want these recordings to show my intent." The accountant's voice responded, "The documents are airtight, Arthur. The money is for Claire's health, education, maintenance and support. Any other use would be a breach of fiduciary duty." My grandfather's voice again. "Good. I want my granddaughter to know she's valued, that someone invested in her future. She's going to need it with those parents." The courtroom was silent. Even Edward looked shaken. My grandfather, 26 years ago, had known. He had tried to protect me, and his own son had betrayed that trust. My mother had a breakdown on the stand. Edward put her up to testify, probably hoping for sympathy, but it backfired spectacularly. She started by trying to justify their actions, claiming they had to make difficult financial decisions for the good of the family. But under Colin's cross-examination, she fell apart. "Mrs. Monroe, you testified that you used Claire's trust fund for family expenses. Can you explain how a $70,000 Columbia tuition payment exclusively for Lily's benefit was a family expense?" "Lily is part of the family," my mother said defensively. "And Claire isn't." "Of course she is, but she chose a less expensive school. She was more practical." "She chose a less expensive school because you told her you couldn't afford anything else while simultaneously spending her own money on Lily's expensive school. Is that correct?" My mother's face crumbled. "We were going to make it up to her. We always planned to make it right. When she's 28 years old and you've taken almost everything, when were you going to make it right?" "I don't know," my mother screamed suddenly. "I don't know. Okay, we made mistakes. We thought we had more time. We thought Claire wouldn't find out. We thought we could fix it before she knew. Is that what you want to hear?" The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order. Edward looked like he wanted to disappear. And I sat there watching my mother's confession, feeling vindicated and heartbroken all at once. My father was the last to testify, and he barely made it through. He admitted to every withdrawal, to every lie, to every moment he watched me struggle while spending my money. He cried on the stand, which might have been moving if it wasn't decades too late. "Do you have anything to say to your daughter?" Collins asked him in his final question. My father looked directly at me for the first time in weeks. "I'm sorry, Claire. I'm so deeply sorry. I was weak and I let your mother convince me that we would fix it later. I told myself we were borrowing against your future to secure your sisters, and that somehow made it okay. I was wrong. I destroyed your trust in me, and I destroyed your financial security. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they came back, the forewoman read the verdict in a clear, strong voice. "In the matter of Claire Monroe versus Daniel and Elaine Monroe, we find in favour of the plaintiff on all counts. The defendants are ordered to pay full restitution of $3,100,000 in misappropriated funds, plus $2,300,000 in lost investment growth, plus $1 million in compensatory damages for emotional distress, plus $500,000 in punitive damages. Total award $7 million. I heard the number but couldn't process it. $7 million. It would never give me back my 20s. It would never erase the trauma of feeling worthless, but it was justice. The judge added additional comments noting the egregious and systematic breach of fiduciary duty and the profound emotional harm inflicted on the plaintiff by those who should have protected her. She ordered my parents' assets to be frozen and liquidated to satisfy the judgment. In the hallway afterward, my grandfather held me while I cried. Lily was there too, and Jaden Collins with a rare smile on his usually stoic face. Across the hall I saw my parents leaving with Edward. My mother wouldn't look at me, but my father paused and met my eyes. The guilt and shame I saw there didn't make me feel better, but it did make me feel seen. The aftermath was messy. My parents had to sell their house, the one purchased with my money. Their cars were repossessed. My mother's jewellery collection was auctioned off. Every luxury they had bought with my trust fund was stripped away to pay the judgment. They filed for bankruptcy, which didn't discharge the debt to me but destroyed their credit and their reputation. The local news ran the story for weeks, and my parents became infamous in Bellevue social circles. Friends abandoned them. The country club revoked their membership. My mother, who had lived for maintaining appearances, became a pariah. Part of me felt guilty for their suffering, but then I would remember 28 years of being treated as less than, and the guilt would fade. Edward faced his own consequences. The state bar opened an investigation into his inappropriate contact with me and his handling of the case. He was suspended from practice for 6 months and required to take ethics courses. His reputation took a hit, and several of his high-profile clients dropped him. Lily and I began slowly rebuilding our relationship. It was awkward and painful, but she was committed to making amends. She got a job instead of relying on our parents' money, moved to a modest apartment she could afford herself, and started therapy to process the guilt she carried for unknowingly benefiting from my stolen funds. I was proud of her for taking responsibility, even though she had been manipulated too. My relationship with my parents, however, was over. After the trial, my mother sent me a long letter that somehow managed to be both apologetic and accusatory. She was sorry for hurting me, but angry that I had chosen money over family. She didn't seem to grasp that she had chosen money over family when she stole from me for 25 years. I sent the letter back unopened. My father made a few attempts to reach out, but I wasn't ready. I might never be ready. With the judgment secured, I had to figure out what to do with the money. $7 million was an amount I had never imagined having. I could have bought a mansion, travelled the world, lived in luxury to make up for all the years of deprivation. But that didn't feel right. I sat down with Jade and my grandfather one evening and talked about what would truly honour the pain I had endured and the justice I had fought for. My grandfather told me something I'll never forget. Money is just a tool, Claire. What matters is what you build with it. Your parents used your money to build a facade. What will you build? I decided to build something real. I used $2 million to pay off my debts, buy a comfortable home, and invest for my future security. I set aside money to travel to finally see the world I had only read about in books while I was too poor to go anywhere. But the rest I used to create the Claire Monroe Educational Trust. It's a scholarship fund for first-generation college students from low-income families, specifically those who have been failed by their own families. The application asks students to share their stories of financial struggle, despite having family members who could have helped. Every year, we award full-ride scholarships to 20 students covering tuition, housing, books, and living expenses. We also provide mentorship and therapy services because I learnt that poverty trauma runs deep. The first award ceremony was 6 months after the trial. I stood on stage in front of 20 terrified, hopeful young people and told them my story. I told them about being robbed by my own parents, about working myself to exhaustion while my sister lived in comfort, about believing I wasn't worth investing in. And then I told them that they were worth it, that someone believed in them, that they deserved better than what their families had given them. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. After the ceremony, a girl named Maria came up to me crying. She told me her father had spent her college fund on his new wife and stepchildren, and she had been about to give up on her dream of becoming a doctor. "You gave me my future back," she said. That's when I knew I had made the right choice. My parents had taken my money and built nothing but lies and resentment. I took it back and built hope. It's been 2 years since the trial now. I still have hard days when the grief of losing my family hits me. I mourn the parents I should have had the childhood I deserved. I'm in therapy working through the complex PTSD of growing up feeling worthless. It's not something that just goes away because you win a lawsuit, but I'm also happier than I've ever been. I have a beautiful home that I own outright. I have a career I love, working as the director of my own foundation. I have Lily back in my life, a real relationship built on honesty instead of the toxic dynamic our parents created. I have my grandfather who tells me constantly how proud he is of me. And I have peace knowing that I stood up for myself. Last week I ran into my mother at a grocery store. She looked older, worn down. She started to say something, then stopped and just walked away. I felt sad watching her go, but I didn't chase after her. Some bridges are supposed to burn. My parents took my past, but I took back my future. And that's worth more than all the money in the world. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have been able to forgive them, or would you have fought like I did? Drop a comment and let me know. And if this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or had someone steal your opportunities, hit that like button and subscribe. You're not alone, and you deserve to know your worth. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who diminish you, even when they're family, especially when they're family.